What's up, everyone? I'm Justin Moore. Welcome to Creator Wizard, your step-by-step guide to the business of being a creator. We're back for another Friday live stream, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And today, I am super excited, y'all. This is probably the interview that I'm most excited about that I've ever done. And we're going to be chatting with Anita K. Sharma. Anita is the founder and managing partner of Sharma Law PLLC. Anita's firm specializes in providing practical legal advice that protects their clients, which is over 50 YouTubers, digital content creators, and influencers, while enhancing their creative freedom and empowering their growth potential. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Justin. I'm super excited to be here. That was quite an intro. I'm very flattered. So thank you.
Absolutely. Super stoked to have you here. I needed to build you up a little bit there. Not that you needed any building up, but I was trying. Well, awesome. so let's talk about it. Let's get into your background a little bit. I read that way back in prehistoric years, 2013, that you had saw a distinct need for a legal firm committed to adapting to and shaping the digital media industry. So wondering if you could talk a little bit about this aha moment that you had and maybe kind of how you view being a digital content creator online might be different from being, like, let's say, a traditional actor or actress in Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to date myself a little bit here. I've been practicing entertainment law for a long time. So it's been almost 20 years. And when I started in prehistoric times, it was really, the focus was film and TV. And so that's what I started in, and mostly in indie film. And so, fast forward to 2013, and I got my first influencer client, and my first YouTuber, technically. And I really didn't know the space. I didn't really understand what it was about. I just liked her content a lot. So I thought, well, this is cool. And I like to represent talent. So I'll take her on and, let's see what happens. What I noticed really quickly, and this was my aha moment, was that digital content creators owned their channels, right? So whether it wasn't really Instagram back in the day, but whether it was Facebook or YouTube at that time, they could create content and put that content up and build audiences without having a gatekeeper, right? So I was representing a lot of indie filmmakers and stuff like that at the time, who didn't have a lot of leverage, right? So they pretty much had to give their stuff away in order for it to be seen. Distributors, in order for it to be put up on a screen somewhere, distributors weren't paying a lot of money for that. So there were these gatekeepers in place. Once the internet came along, it just removed that. And that was really exciting to me. Like, this particular type of talent, influencers and digital content creators could create content and put it up, and people would see it, and they were building audiences, and they had a ton of leverage. So that was really exciting for me. I was like, wow, this is an area that we need to get into, and we need to support these creators.
Was there the deal flow to justify making that investment as a firm? Because I know you mentioned you had just kind of started out, but I guess, you're running your own business and you're like, okay, if I'm going to dedicate resources to do this, did you think that or were you just being like, okay, I'm bullish on this for the long term, and so I think we should be investing in this, even if the deal flow may not be there right now? Or how did you think about that?
Well, I mean, at that time, it was just me. Right. So there wasn't a ton of overhead. I could take risks.
Right.
I didn't even have an office at that time, technically. So I was agile and I could take risks, and I was definitely bullish on it. And, it took, you start with one client, and it takes a long time to get a client. I tell people, look, from the time I talk to someone to the time I sign them, it could be 6 months. It could be a year. It takes a while for people to make decisions. But I was able to obviously work in other areas of entertainment while also working in digital. So that helped. So it wasn't sort of like I dropped everything, to just focus on digital creators. But, what I did was, network like crazy, went to LA at least once a quarter, met with managers and agents in the space, and really forged those relationships as well as talent. And that's how I was able to build a practice. So it wasn't really jumping all in at once, but it was, a gradual build.
Yeah. Interesting. And so, walk me through the process of how you work with your influencer clients. I think one of the questions, especially for aspiring creators as their career grows, is they're trying to understand, okay, like what does a lawyer do versus what does a manager do? What does an agent do? Right.
Sure.
So it's like, it seems very confusing, I think.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious, like if you could walk me through, like, what is your typical way in which you work with your clients?
Sure. So most of our clients already have representation in the form of a manager or an agent. So the way we work is we're part of that team, right? And so managers and agents are really there to direct your career, build your career, bring you opportunities. We don't have the bandwidth as a law firm, and it's not our jobs to sort of go out there and pitch you, right? And get deals and talk to brands and all of that kind of thing. That's what your managers and agents are there for. So what we do is we help with all the legal, right? So the contracting of that. So once a deal is done, whether it's a brand deal, a book deal, a podcast deal, a music deal, whatever that looks like, we're the ones that are going to come in and make sure that the paperwork protects you, but also reflects the deal terms that the rest of the team has reached on your behalf or that you've negotiated on your behalf. We definitely do some negotiation as well, and we definitely have some clients that don't have managers or agents, and in that way, it's a little bit different because we're more involved in the negotiation process of a deal. But we also, the way I describe what we do is we're really the talent that we represent, we're their general counsel. So whatever happens to come up for them, we will help with. So we help them with intellectual property, like registering trademarks, with the day-to-day contract stuff. When they, are ready to form a business entity, we help with that. So all of the business and legal side of it, we're really there for. And what I tell my clients is, you guys focus on the creative, let us worry about the business and legal, because creating good content is key to your business, right? So we want you to be able to focus on that and not worry about the other stuff. I can't make great videos. I'm not posting content on YouTube because that's not my skill set.
Yet, Anita,
well,
yet.
I don't, maybe one day, but not today. Yeah, maybe one day. But yeah, that's what I, tell clients, let us worry about the business and legal. You focus on the creative.
Right. And so for those clients that don't have representation or managers or agents or whatever, are you hopping on the phone like during the negotiation process with the brand, or is it like you just kind of take over in the email thread, or like how hands-on are you getting?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, as we know, everything's done via email these days, but we're absolutely open to hopping on the phone. I'm sort of old school that way. I think sometimes hopping on the phone is a way faster way to resolve issues than via email, especially since in email you can't get the tone. So an email might sound harsher than an actual phone call. So yeah, I'm open. It really depends on the situation, but I love what I do. I love representing talent. So I'm more than happy to do what it takes, right, to get a deal done.
One question I have for you is like, I think thinking very like basically about how creators think about their businesses is like, I think the struggle that I think a lot of aspiring creators have is that, when they're just starting out, it's kind of hard to get management or representation, right? Because it's like you need to have a certain amount of like deal flow, right, to justify someone like wanting to invest their time, whether it's getting 20% of your deals or you're paying them retainer or whatever to do more things in your creative business, like answering emails and all this stuff, right? And yet. So that somehow seems a little bit more difficult, but the more immediate need, I think, for a lot of creators is people to look at brand deal contracts for them, right? Like having a lawyer look at that, because they're probably getting brand deals before they're even getting close to getting a manager, right? So they're starting to get deals and things like that. So it's like, but I think one of the biggest challenges is that like sometimes the deal size is not that large to justify bringing in a lawyer, right? So it's like, okay, this bill's for like $500 or for $1,000 or whatever. It's like, and I think a lawyer is going to be like $200 an hour, or $300 an hour, whatever it's going to be. So like, what do you do in that situation? Like, how, like, what would your advice be to creators?
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, it is tough. I mean, it is tough when it's, smaller deals. I do think there are attorneys out there that will work with you on a scale, depending, and use flat fees, et cetera. I mean, there are definitely attorneys that will do that. When I look at a client, I look at not necessarily the size of that client, but first of all, is the content interesting, right? That's key. And is this influencer looking to build a business? Like, is there the potential for growth here? We love to sort of come in at the ground floor, so to speak, and work with people where there is that potential for growth, where they're professional, they're creating amazing content, And so I really think it is possible to get an attorney, you know, with that smaller deal size. But I think it's, you know, it's what we look at is that growth, right? So the hope is that you start with the smaller deals and then they grow. But of course, you know, the focus is always on good content as well.
That's actually quite interesting because I wouldn't actually have thought that you would appraise something like that as a legal professional, as a lawyer or whatever, in your assessment of whether you'd want someone as a client. So you're actually looking at whether someone has growth potential, which is quite interesting because I think a lot of creators think that like lawyers are very transactional, and it's like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be making, you know, my minimum hourly rate or whatever for a certain number of hours on this deal, I'm like not interested. But you're actually saying that you actually do look at like the long-term prospect or like the business relationship and like what that could potentially turn into.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I can't speak for any other lawyers. I can only speak for myself. And so for us, it is an investment, right? But we're in a position now where we can do that, where we can take on smaller clients and hope that they build and they grow, you know? And again, like, honestly, the thing that I look at the most is the content. I mean, is it compelling? Is it interesting to me? You know, is this person a young activist? Are they speaking about things that are really important? You know, like, I want to work with that person. I want to be able to support that. So yeah, there's a number of different factors that we look at.
Interesting. And I wanted to just give a quick shout out to some of the folks in the chat here. Thanks for everyone watching. We got Drea all the way from England. We've got Road to Finish Oliver. Oliver says, oh my God, legal is such an important part of running an influencer business, from contracts and copyright all the way to protecting your intellectual property. It's a lot. He said, first things to do when going full time as an influencer: hire an accountant, hire a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for any business, right? I think it's funny that, you know, obviously we're talking about the influencer business, but honestly, for any business, it's important, right? So, not only the influencer business. I also see there's somebody from Canada.
Yes.
From Canada. So welcome. I am actually Canadian. So
there we go. Yes.
I'm seeing that
flag. Yeah, we do have a global audience though. So I think, but it's like,
That's
I think
amazing.
the cool thing is that a lot of the stuff that I think we're going to talk about today are fairly universal in terms of like, as a creator, thinking about yourself as a business, being professional, trying to get organized, you know, whether you need to incorporate or, formalize your creator business, these types of things. Yeah, Dee says, good to see another Canadian. Okay.
I've got these skylights above me, by the way, and so now the sun's moved. We have some shadows, but hopefully it's okay.
It's all good. Your wisdom is going to be that much more. It's going to be like gems.
I'm glowing.
Yeah, you're glowing. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. That's better.
Okay, so question. So, like, going back real quickly to the thing about like, okay, you got into $1,000 deal. What do? Yeah. You probably want to glance at the contract, at the very least, even if you're not going to hire a lawyer. What are there like just clauses, like at a bare minimum that you, obviously I always say, like, I'm not a lawyer. I always recommend people like secure legal counsel, look at your contracts. Right. But if you were not able to do that, what are the clauses? Is it like SOW? Is it the usage rights, exclusivity? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I have to give the disclaimer that this is not legal advice.
Yes.
This is just like a general conversation, but read everything. So everything is important, right? From the usage, how can the brand use your content, to exclusivity, how long are you exclusive? How long can you not post for anybody else? What competitors? Is it clear who you can't post for? Who owns the content? I mean, that's so important. You know, as an influencer, it's your channels that content's going up on, meaning Instagram, YouTube, whatever that social media platform happens to be, Snapchat, TikTok. So, you know, who owns the content, and is the license language clear? Like, do you have a license to use the brands, trademarks, etc.? And then, you know, there's the legal quote boilerplate at the end of a contract. That's also really important, because all of these clauses impose legal obligations on you, you know, and this isn't a matter of scaring you. It's just, you should, when you sign something, you're taking on legal obligations. And so you should make sure that you read everything.
So look, I'm kind of curious, like, if you could, you don't have to get into specifics, obviously, but I'm curious, like, you know, my wife and I, you know, we've been creators for over 10 years, and we definitely have run into precarious circumstances when it comes to our contracts, and we have a lawyer and everything too, but it's like, there always does seem to be like some sort of esoteric thing that happens during the partnership that you like was not covered in the in the contract, right? And I'm curious from your standpoint, like what are the most basic things that creators should think about when it comes to like protecting themselves in a relationship? Like one thing, for example, that we have gotten a lot better about over the years is like building into the contract, like language, much more clear language around reshoots and revisions and things like that, because that's one of the most common things that happens in brand deals, at least, which is like, hey, like you didn't do this right, you need to reshoot the whole thing, right? And so it's like, is that, would you say that that's like a major one, or is like, what other things do you think about when it comes to like trying to protect yourself as a creator?
Yeah. So that's a huge one, approvals and reshoots, right? So you should make it really clear. So first of all, the brand in advance, you should decide on like, what is the creative going to look like, right? What is the expectation from that brand in terms of their messaging and their calls to action, right? Like, so, because they might expect you to say something you're not comfortable saying, and you're like, that's not authentic to me. That doesn't sound like me, and it doesn't even fit in with my content. So you want to establish that all at the outset, right? Before you sign a contract. Like, what is the expectations here? What's the messaging? What's the call to action? What links do they want me to provide? What swipe ups, etc. And then there should be approvals based only on that creative brief and that messaging that they've given you in advance. So there's like, set guidelines that everybody can turn to that make sense, right? So that you can say, hey, the reshoots were there's 2 rounds of approvals. The approvals were supposed to be based strictly on the guidelines that we agreed on in the beginning. And so when they tell you, well, you have to reshoot, you can say, no, actually, I don't have to reshoot because I went by the guidelines that, we agreed to. So I think like that's really important to establish from the outset and make sure that the brand understands your content and what you're going to do and what you're trying to do before you actually sign on with them, because you would be shocked at how many brands do deals. And I'm not dissing brands at all. Brands are awesome. But how many brands do deals with influencers and they don't actually watch their content? and then the influencer sends them, the video or whatever, and they're like, what is this? This is crazy. This is too edgy. We can't have this, so just make sure you're on the same page with that from the get-go.
Yeah, and I one thing I will say about that, and I think that that's really great advice, which is that I think a lot of creators, especially during the negotiation process, get nervous about like asking for revisions to the language of the contract. And I basically say, like, asking for revisions now and having that conversation at the outset when you're doing this agreement is going to prevent much more uncomfortable situations down the line.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, it's in your best interest to like have these conversations at the outset before anything is shot, before you deliver anything to the client, because then it's like, okay, no, like we have language covering all this, in that situation. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, people, I think people see negotiation as some sort of conflict, like a process that's rife with conflict. It's not. A negotiation can very well be a conversation, right? And that's what it should be. And people will respect you as an influencer when you stand up for yourself, when you know your value, and when they know that you've actually read the contract. I mean, to be honest, a lot of these brands and agencies, many times they don't, it's an old contract, it's an old form. They don't even know what it says, like they haven't looked closely at it for a while. So it's really just, it's being professional. You're running a business and you deserve to ask questions. And look, anybody that's going to say to you, well, you're asking questions, this deal is off, is probably not the best person to be working with.
That is for sure.
It's a red flag. Yeah. And there's probably going to be a lot of trouble with them down the road if that's the attitude from the outset. So, just ask the questions you need to ask, make sure things are clear, make sure you understand what's in those contracts and what the expectations are.
Yeah, no, I love that point. That's absolutely true. You got to pay attention to those red flags. By the way, anyone, if you have any questions for Anita, make sure to leave it in the chat below. We're going to be doing like a Q&A closer to the end. And so curious, like any like horror stories that you have of like clients that have entered into agreements, not due to anything you did, but like that they come to you and be like, hey, like, I'm in this really precarious situation. What do I do? Like any lessons learned or stories, anecdotes you can share over the years of like things that have happened?
I mean, there's been, issues where clients have entered into contracts and haven't realized that the brand is going to own their contract in perpetuity, which is a fancy way of saying forever. The brand is going to own the content forever and get to do what they want with it. And so they'll see their content maybe edited or posted somewhere that wasn't discussed in advance, or where they're just like, whoa, wait a second. Like, I shot this, 2 years ago. Why the heck is it on a billboard, or why is it a clip in this commercial, or what's going on here? And so I think that that's, happened before, where unfortunately we didn't have recourse because the contract actually said that the brand owned the content and could do whatever they want with it. So, there's been cases like that where people have come to me after the fact, after they've already signed something, and are trying to figure out how to get additional compensation or whatever for these additional uses. And so, that's one big thing. Or, people not understanding exclusivity, meaning that, if you work for Nike, they're not going to want you to post for, Adidas for a certain amount of time. And some of these brands try to do that for like a year. And you're like, so they're taking you out of a market for a long time. And so just being really clear about those exclusivity requirements as well. And of course, like the approvals and reshoots, and, just ending up in approvals hell because there wasn't sort of a limited number of approvals put on there. And then you have 10 cooks in the kitchen, on the brand and agency side saying, tweak this, change this, do that. No, turn it back, so there's that.
Yeah, no, and you're totally right. I mean, early on, when my wife and I remember one deal we did early on, like we gave broadcast rights because we didn't like, broadcast, okay, whatever, right? And so it's like, and then, we ended up seeing her video on TV for a while, and so it's like, wow, that would have been nice to have been compensated for that, right? So it's like these things that you learn. And I know a creator who also granted rights that she didn't realize, and her face ended up on the product packaging.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Your name and likeness, right? Like, how can they use your name and likeness? And again, like when you sign these contracts, like you are signing away certain legal rights, but you're also taking on certain obligations. So yeah, it's important to read.
Yeah. One question that from Oliver here, Road to Finish. What are some of the biggest contractual mistakes that your clients have done? For example, you mentioned that someone noticed themselves on a billboard 2 years after publishing a video. Other contractual mistakes, Anita, that you like, common ones that you see people like creators making?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, sort of what we just talked about in terms of like not understanding the exclusivity or not understanding the rights that are being granted, like you just said with the broadcast rights, for example. So it's really just, I think, sometimes because legal documents are boring and the language is very cumbersome, and there's like, sentences that are 5 lines long, and, you can start to read it and your mind just kind of tunes out because you're not an attorney and you're just like, whatever, man, like, I don't know what this even means, which is understandable because if you're not a lawyer, it's hard to understand. But I think, people read things quickly and they kind of gloss over things that they didn't understand. And so, I know I keep saying this and I sound like a broken record, but honestly, the biggest mistake I see is just people not reading the contract and just signing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the one thing I have learned is that I think just reading the contract at all seems overwhelming. But what I tell creators is that, yes, there may be stuff that you may not understand about it, but just read it. There will be some stuff that you understand. And like, so you'll be like, wait, like, for example, I agreed to do 1 YouTube video, not 2 YouTube videos, right? So it's like very basic stuff that like even if it's not a super large deal size, like, like don't just ignore it and just assume it's right, because the other thing too that I've experienced is that sometimes brands, they're not putting stuff in like maliciously, or like they're not trying to be nefarious. It's just like, oh yeah, we copied and pasted that from another influencer and we like made a mistake. But like if you sign it, like they could ultimately hold you, and if they want to be shady about it, they could ultimately hold you to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, what I always say as far as that's concerned is that people say, oh, well, I have a relationship with so-and-so at the agency or at the brand. It's all cool. Like we know each other and, it's okay. Like I'm just going to sign this. That person might not be around forever. There's a huge amount of turnover at these places. And so the next person that comes along, all they have to go on is the contract in terms of what was discussed and what is, what the obligations are and the requirements on the influencer's part. So don't assume because you have a relationship with somebody somewhere that it's going to be okay, because you have to remember that that person might not be there forever. And in the advertising world, there's a huge amount of turnover. So people come and go, go to different agencies, brands, et cetera. So, that's something to just really think about. And also it's I don't think brands are nefarious either at all. I think that it's exactly what you just said. There's a lot of cutting and pasting going on. There's also, these are old forms, people, agency, like the accounts people aren't necessarily interested in reading it either, right? But it also brings me to the point that we touched on before, like, please ask questions. It's okay. If paragraph 2 is 17 sentences long and you don't get it, or 17 lines long and it's actually 2 sentences, because lawyers are insane and like to write these crazy run-on sentences, ask questions. Just be like, hey, I read the contract, not really sure what this section means. Can you please explain it to me? That's okay. That's okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And another thing I hear often is like, oh, we'll just use this email thread as like the agreement, or we'll use this DM conversation on Instagram or whatever as a conversation. And I'm always just like, red flag. Like, that's not, I mean, I know a lot of creators have done that, but it's like, I just never, you always want to.
Yeah. And by the way, that can actually be a binding contract. So just as a heads up, I actually have this case with another client where there were some DMs, like, there's elements to a contract without getting too deep into the legal weeds. But, if there's an offer and acceptance, there's terms, et cetera, it can very well be a contract over email or DMs. So, just be careful about that too, in terms of what you're agreeing to. I mean, obviously a contract, a real contract on paper, so to speak, is the best way to go about it.
Yes. No, absolutely. That's a great point. So just to reiterate what Anita just said is that at the very least, if you do have some sort of paper trail on email or DM where there was some sort of exchange of agreement about what was going to actually be exchanged in that business relationship, that can actually be, I mean,
that could be what's called an implied contract.
Right. And the only catch there is that if you do ended up needing to like drag this person into court or an arbitration or whatever, that's going to cost you money too, right? So you
never want to litigate.
Yes,
ever.
yes.
The goal is to always avoid litigation, which is expensive and drawn out and long and painful.
Have you ever had to litigate for a influencer contract situation?
Yeah, so we don't actually litigate. We're not a litigation firm, which it's obviously a highly specialized area to litigate and to know how to do that and file claims within the right courts in your state, et cetera. We do work with a litigation attorney who we love and a litigation firm. But yeah, we've absolutely gotten into litigation before. I actually have 3 ongoing litigation cases with clients right now, just about various things. One was like a trademark issue, one's like a copyright infringement. But yeah, we use outside counsel for that. But it absolutely does happen, and sometimes it is worth moving forward. It just depends on the situation. Yeah,
the interesting thing that I've always experienced, at least with simple brand deal contracts, is that I think brands understand like it can be, especially if the influencer has significant influence and a significant voice. It's like it's kind of like a value trade-off. Like, do I really want to like potentially have this influencer start flaming the brand on social because we're like coming after them for some reason or something, right? So it's like most situations, the brand just decides either to not pursue it, or they just say, okay, this is breach of contract. We'll just dissolve the agreement or whatever. But it's like that's interesting. So it sounds like the litigation that you're, at least in this situation, it's like related to something a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I mean, we do have one case actually where a client has not been paid by an agency, and we're going after them because the amount was significant enough for us to do that. So there is that one issue. Usually we do not have brand deal litigation at all because of the reasons that you say. I will say though, I do tell my clients to not make things public on social media until we've exhausted all options. Exhausted is a better word. Yes, exhausted all options. Do not get out there and start slagging people publicly. A, you have to be careful what you say. B, if there is litigation, it can come back to haunt you. And C, it's not a good look for working with other brands in the future. So I'm not saying not to do it. In some circumstances, it's absolutely the right way to go. But I would say in general, don't start slogging anyone or anything on your socials. It's just not a good look, I think.
There's actually like, and we have to get too deep into specifics, but this has actually come up in the news in the last week or so with a pretty prominent influencer marketing agency that my wife and I have worked with. A lot of creators I know have worked with over the years that has started falling behind on their payments to influencers. And this is something also that has happened to me and others that I know, and like the situation where it's like, okay, they're not responding to your emails. Right. Yeah. They're not, they're like months overdue on the payment. You find out that there's other creators that have not been paid by the agency. So what do you do in a situation like that, where you're like trying to chase down payment from a brand? Like at what point do you go to like, okay, maybe I need to like start involving some lawyers to help me like get this payment?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's really a cost benefit analysis, to be perfectly honest, in terms of like what, were you owed, $5,000 or were you owed $25,000? I mean, if you're owed $5,000, it sadly might not be worth it, because it's going to cost you more to, litigate that and to hire somebody to send letters, etc. And then, what I always say to clients is like, we will never threaten to sue unless we're actually going to sue. So do not make that threat unless you're going to follow through on it. If you say, if you don't do A, B, and C, we're going to sue, you have to sue if they don't do A, B, and C, meaning you don't legally have to, but you're just going to lose all credibility if you don't, right? So you're just, after that point, they're just going to be like, whatever, these people are never going to sue us, so who cares? So don't ever make that threat unless you're actually ready to carry it out. I know the agency you're talking to, we have some issues there that we're dealing with them. I think that when you do get an attorney involved, they do take it a bit more seriously, and they kind of have to. There's insurance requirements. Once they get a letter from a lawyer, they have to kick it up to the right person, etc. But really, like, it's unfortunate, but it is a cost benefit analysis of just looking at, is it worth it to hire somebody to chase this down? I mean, some litigation attorneys work on contingency, right? So they'll take 33% of whatever they're able to recover for you. So that's also the avenue if you need to go after somebody who hasn't paid you.
Interesting. So if it wasn't contingency, what's your ballpark cost of how much it would take to take a brand to court over a
I mean, it's a minimum of like 10,000 at least.
10,000. Okay. That's good to know.
Like all in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oliver has a question here from Road to Finish, or just to say a general sentiment, which is that the biggest issue for him has been the lack of experience in the terms of like what should be included in the contract. And so if they send over the contract, it's hard to know whether it includes everything it's supposed to, right? So how do you, is it just like repetitions, like seeing enough contracts and like starting to understand what should be included in there? Or like, how do you like, it's like, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing, right?
Right. I mean, look, it's hard for me, like, again, like, obviously I can't give out legal advice, but it's also hard for me to say, well, look for this, this, and this. I mean, every deal is different, and every deal has different sort of clauses in it, or written in different ways. It depends on the brand. It depends on the deal. It depends on how long the term is, etc. I will say, look, at a minimum, at least look in there for what has been agreed to. Right. So just like at a minimum, make sure that what they're sending you actually reflects what your discussions were. The deliverables are correct, the posting dates, the approvals, all of that, the usage. At least make sure the deal terms are correct. But otherwise, it is hard if you're not a lawyer. It's hard to look at a contract and understand what should be in there and should not be in there. I mean, that's a whole that's a law school class.
Yeah, I know exactly, right. And Oliver actually has another interesting question, which is that how about having a breach of contract clause with sanctions for a breach? So is there a point of having such a clause as default, even if you don't have a lawyer to litigate possible breaches? Like they have to, let's say, if they like one thing, for example, like specifically for our we have a clause where it's like, okay, if they, because a lot of times a brand will have contracts saying that they can terminate the agreement for any reason, for any, like in their sole discretion, right? And oftentimes we'll say in there, okay, well, we'll amend that to say something like, okay, well, if you terminate for any reason and we have already completed production, even if we haven't like posted yet, you have to pay us 100% of the fee, right? Because we made the content. It's your choice not to terminate this, right? But and so like things like that,
or they'll pay you for the cost to date.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. So you think stuff like that is like totally reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. So you should definitely try to put language in there. If they're going to terminate what's called at will, so they're going to terminate without cause, they're going to terminate at will, that if you've started production or, they have to pay you some kind of what's called a kill fee. Not the nicest word for it, but they're killing the deal. So they have to give you a kill fee, or they're going to pay you at least for services rendered up to that date for your costs. And most brands won't push back on that because it's not unreasonable.
Right.
Once you get big enough, a lot of our clients, to be honest, we put in what's called a pay or play clause, which means the second that they sign the contract, they're getting paid whether the deal happens or not, as long as they're not in breach, obviously, as long as they're ready, willing, and available to do the work. If the brand decides not to move forward for whatever reason, that they still have to pay them the entire fee. So, you can eventually get to that point.
Right. Okay. So question here. You mentioned at the top that in addition to brand deals, your firm works on things like licensing deals, book deals, co-branding deals, and so on. So I think a lot of creators don't really think about how lucrative some of those types of things could be. Those types of revenue streams. So I'm curious, how do those types of deals come together? How early on in the process are you getting involved in that? Is it the kind of thing where their managers or their agents are kind of coming to you and they've already got a publisher or a partner in tow, and they're basically saying help us iron out the deal points, right? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so it varies according to the influencers or the level they're at and what their managers and agents are like, how capable they are, how connected they are. So I will say nowadays, we, and I love this part of my job, is we do connect people a lot because we are so connected within the industry. And we're one of the few firms that have that, quote, traditional background in film and TV and literature. So, we are able to connect clients a lot. So if a client says, I'm really interested in writing a book, we're able to sort of connect them and help them make that happen. I mean, one of the things that I say to our clients is, your success is our success. So obviously we want our clients to be successful as possible. So I'm happy to connect them to people that we know to try to help them accomplish their goals. In other situations, we have managers and agents, if you're with a big agency like a CAA, WME, UTA, A3, ICM, they're have within, those agencies, they're going to be able to just get the job done, they're going to be able to get you those deals. And then they bring the paperwork to us and they say, look, we got a deal for, the client to do a cookbook. Here's the contract. Now it's up to you. Take it away and kind of, if there's deal terms in there that weren't spoken about or talked about, then, we have the expertise and the ability to work with the rest of the team, meaning the manager or the agent or both, and say, did you guys discuss royalties, after a certain number of years, or royalties that, international, et cetera, and sort of bring up those points and work together.
Interesting. So how early do you think in a creator's career should they be starting to think about some of those types of monetization strategies? Because I think a lot of creators sometimes get very they get tunnel vision with respect to just okay, I'm just going to make money on my YouTube ads, and I'm going to make money on brand deals, or I'm going to make merchandise. Is very tunnel vision. But do you help advise, or is that kind of your manager's job to be hey, why don't you do some of these other things? Is that what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you. We don't really have the bandwidth to sort of help advise with that, in the sense of hey, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. I mean, if I see something interesting and I say one of our clients is doing something and I think another client would be a good fit for that, or maybe you should try it. For instance, creating courses, this is a big thing now. A lot of influencers are doing their own courses. And so I might say to, that influencer or their other representatives, I might say, hey, you know what? Has she ever thought about doing a course? Because we have another client that's doing one. It's working out really well. So there's things like that we'll definitely do. I think I always say this, and it's because, I did go to film school, and I know we didn't talk about that, but, I stopped practicing law for a while and I went to film school and I learned producing. Yeah. So I've been on the creative side. I love the creative part of things as well, but focus on the content. I'm always telling people, I think if you want to do a book, if you want to do something else, that's awesome. Just make sure it's going to be good, right? Ultimately, it's I think people are oh, I got to do a book. I gotta like sell some merch. I gotta like, because that's the influencer thing. Everybody's doing it and their friends are doing it. Just make sure like whatever those next steps are, that it's good. Like it's gonna look good. It's something that you're comfortable with. It fits in with your brand. And I think people, even with the brand deals, start to sort of lose sight of the content and start to focus on the money that's coming from brand deals, and just like it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse, as my mom would like to say. It's if you're creating good content, the brand deals will come to you. So I just never lose sight of that.
Yeah, it's a great point. So let's say that a creator grows their career, okay, and now they're at a point where they want to hire a lawyer, and to help them kind of review their partnerships and their business development, things like that. So, what qualities should they look for in a lawyer, right? Like how can they tell whether someone actually like understands social media and what it's like being a creator?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just because someone's a family member doesn't make them a good lawyer. I will say that. People are always like, well, my uncle's a real estate lawyer and I had him look it over, and that's great. And I'm sure your uncle is a fabulous real estate lawyer. I think you look for a lawyer who has experience in this industry, right? Like who understands things like copyright, who understands like the advertising world, has an experience there, like, understands the entertainment world, obviously. So ideally, you're going to find an entertainment lawyer or somebody who works within entertainment and media in some context. So experience is so important. It's interesting to me with lawyers, because I feel like people think if you're a lawyer, you can pretty much do anything, right? So like, you're a lawyer, you could be, represent a criminal, or you could do a real estate deal, or you could do somebody's will. And that's not how it works, right? Like you would never go to like an eye doctor to operate on your heart, right? So it's the same thing with lawyers. Make sure that they have experience in the area that you're in and that you need help in.
Yeah, and like I think one of the hottest questions about this is like, how much should I expect to pay them? Like, is it hourly? Is it going to be like a percentage of the deal, or like what is what's like a reasonable estimate of like how much I should expect to pay a lawyer to like help me with this kind of thing?
Yeah. So, again, I can't speak for all lawyers, but I'll tell you the way we work. So we work, so we're based in New York City. We also have an attorney out in LA. If you're in New York or LA and you are an entertainment lawyer and you're working in the industry, usually the way it works if you're representing talent is you take 5%. So you take 5% of the deals that you work on. And that's on an ongoing basis, by the way. So if like we close a book deal, we're taking 5%, of the fee, the upfront advance, the royalties, everything. And so that's how entertainment lawyers in these, in New York and LA work, for sure. I don't know how it works in like a smaller city or smaller town. Maybe there's like one lawyer and, that's doing entertainment work, and they might want to bill you hourly. One thing I would say is to ask from the outset, and, how are you going to bill me? How's it going to work? Like if you're talking to a partner at a law firm, and their rate's $500 plus an hour, ask them, are you going to be doing the work, or is one of your junior attorneys going to be doing the work, and how much do they bill, And it's also perfectly okay, and you should do this. Ask them for a ballpark figure of how much something's going to cost, right? Like, and then tell them, look, if once the fees are above $1,500, can you let me know? Can you let me know so that you can keep track of those costs? So, there's all kinds of things you can put into place that make dealing with a lawyer kind of less intimidating, less scary. And again, like if you talk to an attorney and they don't want to answer these questions, or they don't want to let you know when a bill has hit a certain level, et cetera, they're not the right person to work with, period.
That's really, I love that. And I think that's actually leads really well into the next question here, which is that like talking about protection as a creator and trying to understand how to kind of like set yourself up for success. Is there like a significant enough value to having a corporate entity like an LLC or an S Corp or something that it justifies the investment of like going through the rigmarole of like doing it in your state or your country or whatever? It's like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So first of all, it's not a lot of money. to start to set up a corporation or an LLC. You should also talk to an accountant, by the way, because in different states, there's sort of different advantages to using a corporation versus an LLC. And there's also, again, different reasons to do one or the other. So you should definitely talk to an accountant for tax reasons as well as an attorney. But the biggest thing it does is it protects you from personal liability, and that's hugely important. So what would happen is you would form, influencer branding LLC, or whatever you want to call it, and then you would sign all of your contracts in the name of Influencer Branding LLC. So in that way, you're one step removed, and you're not going to be personally on the hook for things. Whoever you're signing the contract with is going to have to look to your company for any sort of, recourse. And so that keeps you and your personal bank accounts out of it. And then so obviously if you open a business entity, you should open a corresponding bank account for that business entity and keep all your monies, from your business separate from your personal. And, they can't come after you. Maybe you own a house, maybe you own a car, et cetera. Like you don't want them to be able to, you don't want somebody to be able to get at those assets.
What is the, I'm going to ask kind of a two-tier question, and it might be a little complicated, but like, as an influencer business, like is your corporation or your LLC different enough from you? Like, because I know, like, if you have a corporation, you might have employees and, payroll and all this stuff, right? But it's like just being an influencer, like, would it be easy to pierce the corporate veil because of the fact that it's just
Right.
like a entity that you use to sign your contracts, basically?
Yeah, well, it's very impressive, Justin, that you even know the term "pierce the corporate veil." I'm like, whoa, blown away.
I'm trying here, Anita. I'm trying.
Amazing. For anyone who doesn't know what Justin means by that is, can they just be like, this is a sham, corporation LLC, and it's actually just you? And no, they can't. It's very difficult to pierce the corporate veil. I mean, and again, this is like a whole other lecture, so to speak, but there's all sorts of things that you need to do to make sure that you're following the rules, that you have the right paperwork for your entities, and that you're filing what you need to every year, et cetera, to make sure it's in good standing. But once you have that and your paperwork's in order every year, you're making sure it's in order. There's certain things that you have to do. It varies from state or province or wherever that, you live. So make sure you know the regulations in your area for your entity, for your business entity. But yeah, as long as you're following the rules and you're doing all that and you're not commingling funds, you're not, you've got separate bank accounts. Like there's all kinds of stuff that you need to put into place. It's not hard. It's just, again, you're running a business, so you should be doing these things. And making the effort to do them. But as long as you're keeping funds, et cetera, separate, it's not easy to pierce the corporate veil.
To put a finer point on what Anita just said, everyone in the chat, about commingling funds. This is really important, which is that basically do not mix your personal and your business expenses. So if you have a S Corp or an LLC or whatever, or even a sole proprietorship, you can have a separate business, checking account for a sole proprietorship too. Just make sure that you're not like, your grocery bill is not in the same thing as the camera you just bought off Amazon or whatever, right? Like make it very clear that if there was any sort of audit or anything like that, that it would just be very easy for them to determine like which expenses were where. And actually, that's an interesting, like, do you have any perspective on like, is there a certain threshold of income where you think it's like fine to just stay as a sole proprietor, as a creator, until you get to like a certain amount or something?
Yeah, I mean, we don't give any tax advice, obviously, because we're not accountants. So I couldn't say that there's a certain threshold of income. I think it's more like, as your deals get bigger and there's sort of more at stake, and again, there are tax advantages, to having an entity, et cetera. So I think it's a personal decision, but it's also a smart one. And the sooner that you can do it, the better, just to protect you from that personal liability aspect.
Yeah. Interesting. So kind of to wrap it up here, if you guys have any final questions for Anita, please let us know in the chat. And I'm just kind of curious, Anita, like what excites you the most these days? I mean, just as you had your crystal ball back in 2013 and you're trying to figure out, should I go into this like influencer thing? Is this like something that is something? Is there anything over the next 5 years, the next 10 years that you're excited about?
Sure. I mean, we're very curious about NFTs. We're really curious about where that is going, and we're following that closely, studying it closely, trying to stay ahead of it. I mean, digital assets are going to be a thing. Absolutely. Maybe not the way it's structured now. There's, people are saying NFTs are a huge bubble, et cetera. And that's fine. Maybe the way that it's structured now, it's going to crash and not work. but digital assets and digital art, selling digital merchandise. I mean, that is really interesting. I think, platforms like Clubhouse, just staying on top of all these new platforms and ways that people are interacting and communicating. It's really exciting to think about, like, what's happening next there. Like this audio only app has blown up, like what I just mentioned, Clubhouse. And so really, really keeping ahead of that. I mean, when we started in 2013, digital media was the Wild West. I think in large part, it still is, and that's exciting because we as a law firm are able to help set those precedents and create that structure of, like, how is this going to work, and what are these contracts going to look like? And so just speaking very generally, I think just working in an environment where it's always like there's something new. It's, the only thing sort of predictable is the unpredictability. And that's exciting to me. And there's sort of like an unlimited number of possibilities, within media. And so between the new platform, gaming as well, gaming is an area that we're actively trying to get into now. I feel like gaming is now where influencers were in 2013. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot of really interesting developments with gamers and within that industry as they sort of figure out, it's $1 billion business. It's $1 billion business for publishers. It's going to be very interesting to see how it works for talent. Moving forward, if you're not a PewDiePie and that kind of thing, if you're not at that sort of level. But yeah, there's lots of exciting stuff to look forward to.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to pull up your site. This is Anita's Sharma Law, PLLC.com if you want to find out more information. And Anita, you mentioned that if you want to follow Anita on LinkedIn, it's kind of the best place to stay updated. I will be launching, an Instagram page for the firm and myself in the next couple of months. So watch out for that. There'll be information on LinkedIn, but we are working on the socials. I'm too busy helping people building their pages to do my own, but I do realize it's something that we need to do. Well, you know what, Anita, I mean, I think like being a TikTok lawyer is a thing, right? You could do a TikTok and just like start teaching people stuff on TikTok too, right? I swear I've seen people doing that maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The tough part for me is my clients are so amazing and create such awesome content that it's people are intimidated by lawyers. I'm intimidated by these creators that are turning out this amazing content. So we'll see. Maybe if I can get a producer or director or people like that on board, maybe I'll be open to that.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, Anita, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really, really great discussion. Like I said, I was super excited for this leading up to this conversation. So everyone, thank you so much for joining the live chat today. We'll be back next Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And Anita, thank you so much again for joining.
Thank you so much, Justin. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. See you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye.